We've had a BBI conversation for a while now, and every day this week we've had a BBI conversation. We started with the BBI conversation with the civil society activists who were raising issues with the BBI process itself and the Constitution Amendment Bill. Well, yesterday we spoke with Governor Kibwana, the governor of Makueni County. He's a constitutional lawyer, a legal scholar. He has been involved in the journey to constitution making previously. He was even a part of this BBI conversation earlier this year. He has moved to the Supreme Court of Kenya seeking interpretation of the court on how the process should be conducted. First of all, he feels that this is a government process and then it's being converted to become a popular initiative. And the government is using state resources and state machinery in a popular initiative route, and that he feels is wrong, and he wants the Supreme Court judges to interpret and give opinion on this. On the other issue, that he also says, you have one bill that has 78 amendments, different amendments to the Constitution of Kenya. This looks like it's a fundamental change to the structure of the Constitution itself. So should we be going to a referendum with just one yes or no to all these changes, or should we be seeking Kenyans to approve or reject change, proposed change per change? We also know that the steering committee that is leading the push towards a referendum and towards now the constitution amendment is already saying that they have over 2 million signatures so far. Their target is 4 million. The constitutional requirement is just about 1 million signatures. Go to the IEBC, let the signatures be verified. What we are seeing is that now there are very many leaders from various fronts who are leading this push across the country. We have seen governors across the country. Every day there's a photo of governors who are now leading the signature collection drive in their counties, in their localities. So what's happening in all this is that the train, like CT said, is well on its way to Mombasa. Shortly, it'll be at the terminus. Okay, the lady who's announcing in the train has already said we've passed the final station. We're heading towards the terminus. So, come on, be prepared. Right.
It's the done deal. It's basically what we're looking at here, but still very many questions being asked, still many concerns being raised. And I think, look, if we're going to continue throwing the word democracy at this thing, then I think it's vital for those questions to be asked, those opinions to be aired, those demands to be made, especially if you're still talking about being in a democratic process. For those questions to come out, then I think it's absolutely necessary, regardless of whether the train has reached where it's going or not. The train that has gone in one direction can very easily come back in the other.
In fact, one often wonders, do trains have a reverse gear?
This is the question. They do. They can come back.
Yes, and at the same speed as they went forward.
Even faster.
Yes, so I think with that in mind, even as we know there's a destination that is being moved towards, there's a consideration that perhaps not only should the reverse gear be engaged, but also this appears to be an express train. Perhaps it's a sort of train that perhaps need to be given, should we say, newer and better journey instructions. Stop at least 3 stages before you actually get to your destination. But then the question is, even with these possibilities, as a discussion point, is it possible?
Is it possible to get there? Let's bring in somebody from the National Secretariat of the Building Bridges Initiative, the people who are now spearheading the signature collection drive, the ones who are now spearheading the next step, which is from there, take it to the IEBC. If IEBC verifies the signatures to be legit, then it goes to the county assemblies, and then it goes to the National Assembly, it goes to the referendum, and then maybe then those changes are adopted by the people. Kakai Kissinger is a human rights lawyer. He sits in the BBI National Secretariat. He's in charge of outreach, training, and partnerships. He joins us on the line now. Good morning, Kakai.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to the Situation Room.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, Kakai, we've had a number of conversations this week on the BBI signature collection drive. You've also seen, it's been covered in the papers, there is a group that has gone to court, 5 activists that have gone to court, and they want some sections of the Constitution protected. There are other groups that have raised concerns about the process of BBI, the signature collection drive, the move to amend the Constitution. We have seen, and yesterday we spoke to the governor of Makueni County, the Professor Kibwana, who is your senior in the profession, who has seen similar issues that he has raised, and this is about the process of going to amend the Constitution. So you've heard all this. When you hear them at the Secretariat, what do you do? Do you look back and you're like, oh, what to? Or are you like, all right, so this one maybe has a point. Let's see if we can call him and invite him for tea.
Thank you very much. I think you've asked very valid questions in terms of the cases that are coming out of this entire process. And remember, this is still part of public participation that is ongoing, and people have rights to go to court and seek for interpretation of one thing or another. That's why courts exist, because courts exist to give interpretation to issues. Now, I want to pick from, and so it's their right to do so, and I want to pick from what you've said in terms of Kibwana. Yes, it's my senior. He actually, in the early 90s or so, he taught me law at the University of Nairobi. And I think one of the biggest problems that is coming out of what I'm seeing in terms of cases that are coming in court is just not understanding the legal steps that are taking place, and also trying to merge the legal steps that are supposed to go on vis-a-vis the political process. You know, constitutional making is both legal and political. And so the merger between the two is very critical in terms of establishing a new constitutional order in place. Now, what Kibwana says is that, if I understood it very well yesterday morning, because I was listening to your show, is that there are 78 issues that have come out of the BBI document, and number 3, there are 13 chapters that have come out of the BBI document, and that the BBI seeks to answer all these questions, and he proposes that the 78 questions that are coming out of the BBI document should then be addressed in a Q&A forum, whereby someone is given a chance to select which of the 78 issues he likes and which he doesn't like. But then the good old professor, who is actually my personal friend, fails to understand that actually the current BBI document that has gone through massive public participation since the handshake moment up till now has only actually 9 thematic areas. Only 9 thematic areas that Kenyans are being told, these are the 9 issues that if we as Kenyans settle them, we should be then happy a country. These are 9 issues that are coming out of the 2010 Constitution. And the entire process of BBI was to actually improve the 2010 Constitution and not to try in any way to water it down. So when you look at the 9 key issues, and I think you guys have read them and you know them, some of them are issues like corruption, divisive election, ethos, inclusivity, and so forth and so on. All those 9 issues, actually, when you look at them, some already found their way in policy legislation, because BBI was about policy legislation, BBI was about administrative legislation, BBI was about constitutional legislation, and BBI was about a legal framework in terms of legislation. So some of them have already been answered. There are policy issues that have been framed. That's why BBI has a very elaborate policy framework. There are legislative issues that have been framed, meaning some of those 9 issues have been unpacked into legislation. Quite a number of legislation then will take place. The third one is administrative action. Some of them have been prepared. There's a very comprehensive matrix on administration where some of those 9 have already found in there. There are only of the 9 thematic areas that BBI is talking about, only actually 4 of them find their way in the constitutional amendment bill that now is out there and people are discussing about it and signature collection is going on. So the good old professor, and myself personally, being in charge of the outreach with my other colleagues, I actually went and trained some governors. And I went to Northern Peak Hotel and trained governors and told them through what is this that has actually changed. From Northern Peak, we went to Naivasha and enlightened them, because civic education is part of a constitutional making process. I did not see Professor Kibwana in Movenpick. I saw him in Naivasha, but I think he walked in late. So I think what Professor Kibwana is trying to indicate or show is that there's need for us to continue doing what we are doing in terms of civic education. Because even him as a lawyer, he got confused of how to deal with those issues.
I think you're saying you're raising something, Kakai, and which is okay. So there are 9 thematic areas being addressed by the BBI, and then how many individual amendments have been proposed in the BBI in the Constitution Amendment Bill 2020? I think that's where the issue is. Are there 78 amendments being introduced, clauses by clause?
Yes, there are 78 of them, and he's right in terms of picking the 78 of them. But his understanding of aiming to understand that you can have as many issues as you can. Then when you reduce these issues into thematic areas, you are only looking at 4 issues in the thematic areas. Now, let me tell you something which I think Professor Kibwana missed out completely. We learn from mistakes and we learn from other countries. This very basic issue of selecting referendum questions has been settled in very many jurisdictions. Let me give you an example. In 1998, Canada went through a similar process. When you remember Quebec was trying to secede from Canada, they went through this problem. And then they realized that this matter can only be dealt at the Supreme Court in Canada. The Supreme Court in Canada came up with 4 standards of how you should conduct a referendum. What is it that you must do to ensure that you conduct a referendum properly? Those 4, if you remember, you can read about it, and history never lies. 1 is that the question must be so simple. It shouldn't be ambiguous. Number 2, you need to go into a referendum or referenda with only one question. That question must either provoke a yes or no. Number 3 is that when you are going into a referendum, the ballot must be simple. Because, for example, how do you expect my grandfather from Kiminini, who is 78 years old, to go into a referendum and start cherry-picking the issues, the 78 issues that Professor Kibwana is talking about? It's not possible. The Constitution, after the last election, the Supreme Court of Kenya came up with a decision and said, if you are going into an election, remember that election was nullified because of the issues of the election was not simple, the result transmission was not simple, and was not verifiable. How do you, then with the current IBC, how will you manage to unpack a ballot paper with 78 questions, start unchecking or unpicking? How will you then mark and come up with a statistic to show actually how many are in favor of this and how many are not in favor?
Kakai, if you step away from the process, Kakai, if you step away from the process of asking those questions, do you feel that there is merit in getting people to understand the process behind which they would answer this simple question? Because even as you give the example of Canada, hold on, let me ask the question. Let me finish the question. Even as you give the example of Canada, there was a reason why they said. Now, understanding the reason behind all of this is what now paved way for this simple question that they would then give, right? Is there need for Kenyans to understand the back end of this simple question? And I think that's what's important there. Before you answer yes or no, do you understand why you are answering this yes or no? Do you think that's important to understand?
Yes, it is important. For example, and this is even where you yourself need to be sensitized. For example, how long have we been talking about this BBI? It's almost 2 years.
We've talked about it for 2 years, yes.
What is public? Just a minute. What is public participation? Every single Kenyan, even us, me right now sitting with you guys and discussing this issue, is part of public participation. What is going on social media? The whole country is discussing BBI. That's public participation. As we go towards the referendum, because there are set timelines in terms of the referendum, as we go towards the referendum, BBI Secretariat is going to roll out massive civic and education in terms of BBI. That you need to understand what it is that is going to take you into a referendum. So what we are talking about is civic education. And we're not lack of the capacities to do civic education. Kenyans are discussing. These are documents that belongs to Kenyans. Remember even during the steering committee meetings, remember even during the task force moment, and I was privileged to have been part of the experts in the steering committee meeting. There was massive public participation. People were bringing in issues, people were bringing in memorandums, people were submitting ideas, people were discussing all this. When it was launched in commerce, people still went on discussing. When it was launched in care, people have been discussing. So there has been massive civic education. And it's not going to stop now, because civic education in terms of public participation must continue all the way to the referendum.
Mr. Kissinger, there's something I don't understand here. You keep saying that, I've heard you say it several times, that Professor Kibwana did not understand. And the implication seems to be there's a conflict in understanding. I don't see it. So I'd like you to explain to me. Professor Kibwana didn't have any issue with the 9 thematic areas. In fact, from what I understood, he said he was excited about it because it seemed to point away to something that he thought the country needed and it was long overdue. He seemed to focus on the amendments that these ensuring that the thematic areas actually come into being would be required. Now, thematic areas, amendments, where's the conflict?
Thematic areas are the 9 issues that BBI decided that these are the issues affecting Kenya.
Yes.
The amendments that Professor Kibwana is talking about are amendments scattered in throughout the 9 thematic areas.
Yes.
That's what he's talking about. And what he's saying you should have each issue with an opportunity for a voter to say yes or no.
Yes, I still don't get the conflict.
And I'm telling you that you cannot do that because I've answered your question by saying...
Why can you not do that?
You cannot do that because one of the basic principles of an election, good practices and standards all over the world that has found itself a bearing in the current constitution says an election should be simple and verifiable. And I gave my example of my grandmother in the village. How will my grandmother in the village understand 78 issues within one ballot? She cannot understand that. My grandmother
actually, maybe they cannot understand it if it isn't explained well, but surely there are experts like yourself whose job it is to condense these things so that it's understandable in the simplest way possible. I mean, even when we elect individuals, do we know everything about them? No, we don't. Do we know everything about the political parties? No, we don't. We simplify it to just who we support. And yet...
And that's why I was saying...
Yes.
That's why you are saying the BBI Secretariat is planning to have massive civic education that will run all throughout. All cadres of people will be educated, will be told, will be unpacked. This BBI process already has... We've been training, for example. Personally, I've been training. I've trained members of parliament on BBI. I've trained all the governors in this country on BBI. I've talked to senators in terms of BBI. I've talked to journalists, media, and so forth on BBI. So this is part of the ongoing process. And nothing stops Kenyans and BBI Secretariat to continue talking about, to unpacking the BBI report. There are even versions of the Swahili report, which is being printed and shared by people so that even those who do not understand English are able to understand it in Swahili.
There's the other concern that comes in, which is the number of amendments that are being proposed. Those 78 amendments touching on 13 chapters out of the 18 chapters of the Constitution. This looks like a very far-reaching amendment of our Constitution. Is it justified? Is it the right time for us? Is this what Kenyans told the task force? Is it what Kenyans told you as experts when you're going around in the around the country? Is it what Kenyans said? All these 78 amendments?
My brother, and I want you to understand me and I want you to listen to me very carefully. These BBI proposals and what has found itself in the document that was unleashed in Bomas of Kenya and eventually in KICT did not come from heaven. It came from you and I. It came from every single Kenyan. The Secretariat went into 47 counties. They collected views from all corners of the country. People brought in, there was a very vibrant email account where people were sending in, those who could not come were sending in documents. There was a secretariat sitting and receiving documents. Yeah. There were town hall meetings coming in. Every single document, every single wording, it is not a generation of the Secretariat or the former steering committee. It is what Kenyans wanted.
Is it an interpretation of what Kenyans wanted, or? It
is what Kenyans wanted. If Kenyans say, for example, let me talk about inclusivity. If people say that the problem of our country is issues of inclusivity, this is a problem we have identified. How do we solve inclusivity? The Secretariat, not the steering committee, did not tell them how to solve it. The steering committee asked them, can you give us plausible chances or reasons of how we solve it? The steering committee's work was to document, to receive document and reduce it into a report.
Maybe I could ask this question from this angle. What we saw in 2002, when Yashpal Gai finished his work with the commission, they came up with an entire report which contained everything that they had been told by the people. In fact, even going to say, in this particular sitting, this is what we were told, this is what we received. Do we have something like that from the BBI task force? Secondly, when they came up with that report, then we had the conference where people sat down and they went through the process of looking at what had been said and therefore how is it being translated into a draft constitution or into the draft. Have we had a similar move done with this particular process?
The move that has been done and which continues to be done before even this bill was published has always been consensus building. And I've said it before. And I'm privileged that I was on that as an expert. And I can assure you, consensus building took place all throughout.
Okay. If consensus building took place.
For example, as I said from the beginning, that a constitutional making process is both legal and is both political. So there has to be a merger between the legality of the document and the political nature.
Sure. Is there a place, Kakai, is there a place that Kenyans can actually go and see that this is a report, it's been tabulated, and this is actually what people said, just as we saw with constitutional building that took place during the times of Yashpal Gai? Is there documented that you can see this is actually what Kenyans said?
And that if you left certain things that were said out, reasons why they were left out, and others included.
Yes. Yes, those documents still belong to the Secretariat. Those documents are by them. Even you yourself, by the way, you should take an advantage and go and ask, let me follow or trace, for example, devolution. What is it that you guys documented in terms of devolution? It will be, it's the documents are there. No documents.
Where are they exactly?
The documents are there.
They're where?
So
we know where the Yashpal Gai documents were. When the Yashpal Gai documents were produced, we know where they were. You could go to Bomas during the National Constitutional Conference. You read. That was part of the agenda of the National Constitutional Conference. When you experts were coming up now with, trying to understand and translate what Kenyans have said and coming up with a report, what is it that you are using? Do we have access to that? Have you published it?
My brother, there was a task force. Do you remember the task force?
Yes.
That task force was the depository of all those documents that were coming in.
Did they publish them?
At no given time did anybody question or say, where are these documents at the time the task force was in place?
Oh yes, there was. On this particular show, we hosted Paul Mwangi, the secretary, and we asked for those reports. And he said those reports will be made available. That's why we are asking again now, where are those reports?
Because for public participation to be complete, surely, don't you think that everything in and about and around the BBI should be available so that the public participation can be comprehensive and can be complete?
And I'm telling you that if, for example, you as a media house, Spice FM, you wrote an official letter, for example, to Paul Mwangi and Professor Adamolo, right? And you told Professor Mwangi and Adamolo, give us those documents that you guys relied on to come up with the report. Do you think they will refuse to give you? No, they will not. They will share all those documents. Those are public documents, my brother. And for example, every county government in this country gave a report. You can even ask county government, can you give us the report you gave vis-a-vis what came out within the compartment? They are there. They are documents that are public.
Kakai, we want to thank you. I think we just ran out of time, unfortunately. This is a conversation that requires longer, and we want to invite you for a longer conversation on this to look at starting the process of civic education, starting how then you want to go about making sure that everybody understands how we got where we are. As you will completely agree and acknowledge, there are very many quarters that have come out to ask very many questions regarding the BBI report from Bomas and even the BBI report from KICC, religious organizations, Catholic bishops, medical professionals, politicians. We have seen all these. Then what is it that they are saying, and how are you as a Secretariat listening to them, and how do you want to engage them? We'll invite you for that longer conversation.
No problem. And I really encourage you guys to read the report as well. Eh?
We have read the entire. We have read
read
all
it.
the reports. 1, 2, 3. We have read all of them. Asante sana.
Now, if you have read, then you will be saying what you have just said.
Asante sana.